Hey folks, welcome back to Toby Talks. If you're new here, my name is Toby Hoy, and I'm glad that you found us. And if you are a returning listener, it's great to have you back for another episode. Today, we're diving into something that I'm asked about regularly, whether I'm speaking at conferences, running workshops, or just grabbing coffee with colleagues. The question always comes up: how do I learn new skills faster? And honestly, it's the right question to be asking right now. The current pace of change in our professional world is absolutely bonkers. The skills that got you your current job might not be the ones that get you your next promotion. And here's the thing: if you're waiting for your company to send you off to a training session or hoping for the perfect online course to just magically appear, that's not a strategy. That's just wishful thinking. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to share the exact techniques that I've used personally and taught to other professionals over the years to rapidly upskill. These aren't theoretical concepts from some ivory tower in the sky. They are practical, battle tested methods that you can start using today, literally today. Before we jump in, let me just say this. When I talk about rapid upskilling, I'm not talking about cutting corners or having a mere surface level understanding of a new topic. I'm talking about smart, strategic learning that maximizes your limited time and limited energy. Because let's be real, you're busy, I'm busy, we're all busy. So let's just dive in. The first technique, I call this the 80-20 approach to skill acquisition, which is based on the Pareto principle. And here is the core idea. In almost any skill, roughly 20% of the knowledge or techniques will give you roughly 80% of the results. Think about that for just a second. Most of what separates a complete beginner from someone who is genuinely competent isn't mastering every tiny detail. It's mastering the core fundamentals. Let me give you a concrete example from my own life. A number of years ago, I needed to learn data visualization for a project. Now, I could have enrolled in a comprehensive 6-month boot camp covering every visualization tool under the sun, but I didn't have 6 months. I had 3 weeks. So here's what I did instead. I spent my first day researching the true essentials. What do most data professionals actually use day to day? I talked to 5 people already doing that type of work. I scoured job postings to see what skills kept appearing. And what I discovered was that if I could just master 3 chart types in Power BI and understand basic data storytelling principles, I could handle about 80% of the work that I needed to do. That's the 80-20% approach in action. But here's where most people mess this up. They identify the 20% correctly, but then they still try to learn it as if they're aiming for 100% mastery. They read entire textbooks. They watch every tutorial they can find, and they get stuck in learning mode forever. Instead, here's what you do. Once you've identified your critical 20%, set a tight deadline. I'm talking days, not months. For that data visualization project, I gave myself 1 week to reach working competence, not mastery, not expertise, working competence. And here's the key move that makes this work. You have to build projects while you learn, not after. Most people consume information first and then think that they'll apply it later. That's backwards. You pick a real project, even a small one, and you learn exactly what you need as you build it. For my data viz example, I didn't do practice exercises. I started building the actual dashboard I needed for my project on day one. I learned what a histogram was and immediately built one with real data. I ran into a problem. I Googled the specific solution. Needed to add a filter, looked up exactly how to do that. No fluff, no extraneous information, just in time learning. The beautiful thing about this approach is that it forces you to focus. You can't get distracted by interesting tangents because you have a deadline and a specific deliverable. And the learning sticks because you are applying it immediately in real context. So let me break down the action steps for you on this one. Step number one is to identify the specific skill that you want to learn. Be precise, not something like, I want to learn marketing, but I want to learn how to run effective LinkedIn ad campaigns. Step two is to research the 20%. Talk to practitioners, look at job descriptions, find the patterns in what actually gets used. Step three is to set that tight deadline for working competence, 1 to 2 weeks max for most skills. Step four is to pick a real project to build while you learn, something you actually need or something that mimics real world work. Step number five is to learn just in time, not just in case. Only consume information right before you need to apply it. This approach has saved me literally hundreds of hours of learning time over my career. And the skills stick because they're connected to a real application on day one. And here's the best part. If you come across a topic that really piques your interest, really makes your socks roll up and down, you can always revisit it later to dive deeper. All right, so let's move to technique number two, the daily micro practice habit. And this one might surprise you because it goes against much of the conventional wisdom about learning. Here's what most people do when they want to learn a new skill. They block off an entire Saturday. Maybe they dedicate the whole weekend. They sit down for 4 or 5 hours straight and try to cram as much learning as possible. Then they don't touch it again for another week or two. Does that sound familiar? The problem with this approach is that it completely ignores how our brains actually work. Memory consolidation, which is the process of moving information from short term to long term memory, occurs during sleep and between sessions. When you cram everything into one marathon session, you're not giving your brain time to do the critical consolidation work. There's been fascinating research on this. Studies comparing distributed practice to massed practice consistently show that spreading your learning over multiple days, even if it's less total time, produces better long term retention and skill development. So here's the alternative. Instead of waiting for that mythical free Saturday that never comes, you practice for 20 to 30 minutes every single day. And I do mean every single day. Consistency beats intensity when it comes to skill development. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, but I don't have 20 minutes every day. And I get it. But let me challenge you on that. You do have the 20 minutes. You might be spending it scrolling social media or watching another episode of whatever show you're watching or hitting the snooze button 3 times on a Wednesday. I'm not judging. We all do it, myself included, but you do have the time. The question is whether upskilling is truly a priority for you or not. Here's how to make this work practically. First, you need to anchor this habit to something that you already do every day. This is called habit stacking, and it's incredibly powerful. For me, I do my skill practice first thing in the morning, right after my first sip of coffee. The coffee is the trigger. Coffee is done, practice begins. No decisions, no willpower required. It just happens. Second, you need to make it ridiculously easy to start. I keep my laptop open to the exact tab or tool that I need for my current skill development. My notebook is already open to the right page. Everything is set up the night before. So there is zero friction in the morning. Third is you need to track your streak. I'm serious about this. There's something psychologically powerful about not wanting to break a streak once you've built one up. I use a simple physical calendar hanging on the wall and a big red marker. Every day I practice, I put a big X on that day. After about a week, you've got this visual chain of big red X's and you don't want to break it. Let me give you a real example of how powerful this is. A while back, a colleague of mine wanted to really improve his public speaking skills, specifically storytelling. Instead of signing up for a weekend workshop, he committed to 20 minutes of practice every single day for 90 days. And here's what that looked like. Every evening, he'd spend 20 minutes doing one of three things: either analyzing a great speech and taking notes on the storytelling structure, or practicing a story out loud and then recording it, or refining one of his own stories based on notes he'd given himself from the previous day's recording. Some nights I would get an impromptu random Zoom link from him to watch and listen live, 20 minutes. That's it. But after 90 days, he'd logged over 30 hours of deliberate practice. And more importantly, the daily repetition meant that the skills were getting deeply encoded. He wasn't trying to remember what he learned 2 weeks ago. He was building on what he had practiced the night before. The results were dramatic. His storytelling improved more in those 90 days than it had in the previous 5 years of occasional weekend workshops and sporadic practice. He even submitted one of his stories to The Moth on NPR. Here's the thing though. Micro practice only works if you're practicing the right things. You can't just mindlessly repeat the same activity for 20 minutes. You need what's called deliberate practice. That means you're working right at the edge of your current ability, getting immediate feedback and adjusting based on that feedback. Back to my storytelling buddy. He wasn't just telling the same story the same way every day. He identified specific weaknesses that he found and made improvements or corrections the next night. Maybe his pacing was off or the emotional arc wasn't clear. He'd focus on that specific element the next day, record it, listen back, and adjust. That is deliberate practice. The action steps for building your micro practice habit. Step number one is to choose a skill to focus on for the next 30 days minimum. Only one, and trying to build multiple micro practices at once rarely works. Step number two is to identify your anchor habit, my coffee. What what do you do already every single day without fail? That's your trigger. Step number three is to set up your environment the night before to eliminate all friction. Make starting effortless. Step four is to start small if you need to. Even 10 minutes is better than nothing. You can always increase it later. And step five is to track your streak visually. Physical tracking works better than digital for most people. Step number six, to focus on deliberate practice, not mindless repetition. Always be working at the edge of your ability. This technique has been absolutely transformative for so many people I've mentored and for me personally. The compound effort of daily practice is real and it's powerful. Let's talk about technique number three, which is named after the brilliant physicist Richard Feynman. It's called the Feynman technique, and it's all about ensuring that you truly understand something rather than just fooling yourself into thinking that you do. Here's the problem this solves. Have you ever read something? Maybe you watched a tutorial and nodded along thinking that you totally got it. And then when you try to actually use that knowledge or to explain it to someone, you realize that you didn't really understand it at all. Yeah, we've all been there. And that's the illusion of competence. And it's one of the biggest barriers to effective learning. The Feynman technique cuts through this illusion ruthlessly. Now, here's how it works, and it is beautifully simple. Step number one is to choose a concept that you want to learn. Let's say you're trying to understand agile project management as an example. Step number two is to teach it to a child. And I mean, actually pretend you're explaining it to a 12-year-old. Write it out or say it out loud like you're teaching someone with zero background knowledge whatsoever. This is where the magic happens. When you try to explain something in simple terms without jargon, you immediately discover the gaps in your understanding. You'll start a sentence and realize that you can't finish it without using technical terms that you don't really understand, or you'll just find yourself getting confused by your own explanation. Those moments of struggle, that's where the real learning happens because now you know exactly what you don't know. Step number 3 is to go back and fill in the gaps. Look up the specific things that tripped you up, not the whole topic again, just the specific pieces that you couldn't explain simply. Step 4 is to use analogies and simplify. Once you've filled in the gaps, go back to your explanation and make it even simpler. Find analogies from everyday life. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough yet. I use this technique constantly, and it has been a true game changer. Let me tell you about a time that it saved me from some serious embarrassment. A few years ago, I was preparing to give a presentation on change management. I thought I knew the material cold. I'd read all the books, taken the courses, even used change management frameworks in my work. But something made me decide to do a Feynman technique run through the night before. I sat down and started explaining the ADKAR model as if I were teaching it to a teenager. And guess what? I completely fell apart when I got to the reinforcement component. I was using all this jargon and all these buzzwords about sustainment and embedding change. But when I tried to explain it simply, I realized I didn't actually understand how to make change stick in practical terms. I don't know what made me think about this the night before, but thank goodness I discovered it the night before and not in the middle of the presentation. I spent 2 hours that night really digging in to that one component, finding case studies and developing some clear examples. The next day's presentation went great because I actually understood the material deeply rather than superficially. Now, here's how you can make the Feynman technique even more powerful. After you've done the initial explanation to yourself, actually teach it to a real person. It doesn't have to be someone in your field. In fact, it's often better if it's not. Teach it to your partner, your friend, your actual 12-year-old, if you happen to have one. The questions that they ask and the confused looks that they give you, the places where they ask you to repeat something because it didn't make sense, those are pure gold. That's the feedback on exactly where your explanation and understanding need work. I've made this a regular practice. Whenever I'm learning something new and significant, I schedule a teaching session with someone. I tell them upfront, hey, I'm trying to learn about X, Y, or Z, and I need to explain it to you to make sure that I really get it. One of my usual voluntold has learned to ask good probing questions, and it's made me a much more effective learner. One more advanced tip on this: record yourself doing the Feynman technique is incredibly powerful. Just use your phone's voice recorder or the camera if you want. Explain the concept out loud as if teaching someone and then listen back to it. You'll catch all sorts of things that you missed in the moment. The ums and the ahs, where you were searching for words, usually indicate a fuzzy understanding. The places where you talked in circles, those are the places that you need more work. So, action steps for the Feynman technique. Step number 1, after learning something, immediately try to explain it in simple terms as if teaching a child. Write it out or say it out loud. Step number 2 is to identify every gap, every place you got stuck or had to use jargon or buzzwords that you couldn't define simply. Step number 3 is to go back to your sources and fill in those specific gaps. Step number 4 is to revise your explanation, making it even simpler and adding analogies. Step number 5, teach it to a real person and pay attention to where they get confused. Step 6, for important or really complex topics, record yourself and listen back to it critically. This technique takes a bit more time up front, but it prevents that terrible experience of thinking that you know something and then failing when it actually matters. All right, so we're moving into technique number 4, the project based learning accelerator. And this is where things get really, really practical. Here's the core insight: you learn faster and retain more when you're learning in service of creating something real rather than just consuming information abstractly. Your brain is much better at encoding and retrieving information when it's connected to a specific context and or application. Think about it this way: you could spend months reading about photography, watching tutorials, and studying composition rules. Or you could commit to taking and editing one photo every day for 30 days and then sharing it online. Which approach do you think will make you a better photographer faster? The second one, obviously. But why? Because every day you're making real decisions and encountering real problems and finding real solutions. The learning is immediate and contextual, and there's accountability because you've committed to shipping something. Here's how to structure project based learning for maximum acceleration. First, you need to choose a project that is ambitious but achievable. This is a delicate balance. If it's too easy, you won't learn much. If it's too hard, you run the risk of getting overwhelmed and then quit. A good rule of thumb is to pick a project where you need to learn 2 or 3 new skills or tools, but you already have some foundation to build on. You want to stretch, not start from absolute zero on everything. Second, you need to make that project public. This creates a little healthy pressure and accountability. It doesn't mean that you need thousands of people watching. Even just telling a few colleagues or friends what you're building or what you're doing and when you'll have it done creates enough social commitment to keep you from going when your motivation wanes. I learned this one the hard way. Years ago, I tried to teach myself web development on my own. I had set up my own project, worked on it whenever I felt like it, and guess what? 3 months later, I made barely any progress. I always had an excuse for not working on it. Then I tried a different approach. I announced to a handful of friends or colleagues that I was building something and something new, and I would launch it on a specified date. Then I invested the necessary funds to get the ball bowling, get the ball rolling. Suddenly, I had skin in the game. People were checking in on my progress, and I couldn't just quietly let it fade away. Not to mention, my thrifty meter had hit the red line. You spent the money, Toby. Now you're pot committed. The combination of the cash investment and that external accountability was the difference between completing the project and abandoning it. Thirdly, you need to build in some progressive complexity. Don't try to build the full project version right away. Start with the absolute minimal viable version and get that working, and then add layers of complexity on top of that. When I was learning to build presentations that really engaged audiences, I didn't start by trying to create a full 45-minute keynote with perfect storytelling, data visualization, and emotional arcs. I started with a 5-minute talk, got some feedback, and then moved on to a 10-minute talk, got some more feedback, and kept building up from there. Each iteration taught me something new, and I applied those lessons to the next. If I tried to build the perfect 45-minute talk right away, I would have been paralyzed by all the things that I didn't know. Fourth, and this is crucial, you need to seek feedback early and often. Don't wait until your project is done to show it to people. Share your messy, imperfect work in progress. The feedback you get while you can still adjust the course is infinitely more valuable than the feedback you get after you've already invested weeks into the wrong approach. I've made this a practice in all of my project based learning. Every week, I share my current state with someone who knows more than me. Sometimes it's just a screenshot, sometimes it's a quick demo, sometimes it's a little more in depth. The 5 minutes that they spend giving me feedback saves me hours of going down the wrong path. Let me give you a concrete framework for this. Let's say you want to learn data analysis. Here's how you would apply project based learning to that. Week number one is to pick a data set that interests you personally. Maybe it's your city's crime data or sports statistics for your favorite hockey team. Go Ducks. Or trends in your industry. Clean the data and then create simple visualizations that answers one specific question. Share that with one person who does data work and then ask for feedback. Week number two is based on that feedback, create a more complex analysis with 3 or 4 visualizations. Start telling a story with the data. Share it on LinkedIn or with a small group. Week number three is to add some statistical analysis, run some correlations, create some predictions, and test hypotheses. Document your methodology and share it again and specifically ask for feedback on your analytical approach. Week number four is put it all together into a complete analytical report or dashboard. Publish it like you're presenting it to a client and publish it publicly. See how that works? Every week builds on the previous week. You're shipping something complete each week, getting feedback, and progressively increasing complexity. By week four, you have built a portfolio piece and learn more than you would have in 3 months of online courses. The action steps for project based learning. Step number one is to choose a project that requires learning 2 or 3 new skills, but isn't completely outside of your current capabilities. Step number two is to make it public. Announce a deadline to people who will hold you accountable. Step number three is to break it into weekly milestones with something shippable each week. Step four, start with the simplest version possible and then add complexity progressively. Step five, share your work in progress every week and actively seek specific feedback. Step six, document what you learn as you go. This creates a knowledge base that you can reference later. This approach works because it combines learning with doing. It adds accountability and gives you a tangible outcome. You're not just learning about something, you're building something real. As usual, we've covered a lot of ground today. So let's bring it all together because information without implementation is just entertainment, right? We talked about 4 core techniques for rapid upskilling. The 80-20 approach, where you identify and focus on the critical 20% that gives you 80% of the results. The daily micro practice habit, where 20 to 30 minutes of consistent, deliberate practice compounds into major skill development. We talked about the Feynman technique for ensuring that you truly understand something by explaining it simply. And finally, project-based learning, where you build real things to accelerate your learning and to create accountability. Now, here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to try to implement all 4 of these at once. That is a recipe for overwhelm and giving up. Instead, I'd like you to pick one, just one. Which technique of these resonated with you the most? Which one feels most applicable to the skill that you're trying to develop right now? Got one in mind? Good. Now, I want you to commit to trying it for the next 30 days. Not forever, not 6 months, just 30 days. That's long enough to see real results, but short enough that if it doesn't feel overwhelming. And here's your homework for this week, if you're up for it. Before this episode ends, I want you to do 3 things. First, write down the specific skill that you're going to develop over the next 30 days. Be specific. not leadership, but running more effective one-on-one meetings, not marketing, but writing compelling email subject lines. Second is to write down which technique you're going to use and exactly how you're going to implement it. What's your anchor habit if you're doing micro practice? What project will you build if you've chosen project-based learning? Get specific. Third is to tell someone, text a friend, post it on social media, email a colleague, make it real by making it public. The difference between people who actually upskill rapidly and those who think about it comes down to this simple step: implementation. Taking that first action before the motivation fades. One last thing I want to leave you with. Learning new skills isn't just about career advancement, though that's certainly part of it. It's about staying relevant, staying engaged, and staying excited about your work. The professionals who are thriving right now aren't the ones who know everything. They're the ones who know how to learn anything quickly. You already have everything you need to become that person. You've got the techniques now. You've got the knowledge. The only thing standing between you and rapid skill development is the decision to start. So, what's it going to be? What skill are you going to master over the next 30 days? Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. If you found this valuable, please share it with someone who's trying to level up their skills. And if you want more content like this, make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss future episodes. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep pushing yourself to become the professional that you're capable of being. I'll talk to you soon.